Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Talk Talk. I'm your host, Kim Davis. It is Tuesday, December the 6th. Listen, y'all, it's here. We are officially in the last month of 2022. And this light is kind of hot. Let me fix that. Let the light there we go. That's much better. Here we go. It's December. It's the final month of 2022. And if there's something that you had planned to do in 2022, the good news is you still have time. Okay, you still have time to get it done, and I encourage you to do that. There's some things that I'm gonna get done before the end of 2022 because I just got to do it. So welcome, 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 and listen, for all of you in Georgia, make sure you vote. If you voted already, call somebody and make sure to get to the polls. This runoff election in Georgia for the U.S. Senate is big in a number of ways. And although I don't live in Georgia, I feel very invested in what happens in that race. So I am encouraging you, if you are in Georgia, you are a registered voter, make sure you vote today. If you voted early, because many of you did, call somebody and make sure that they vote today. It's important. Hey, good morning, Sylvia. My sister's checking in. Welcome, welcome, sunshine. All right, so I'm excited about today's show. I have a special guest for the big interview. He's a colleague and a friend. His name's Coty Davis. He's going to be joining us shortly. But before he comes in, I want to get some of the business out of the way. I want to make sure that you know today's show is brought to you by the World Youth Foundation and the upcoming African American Male Wellness Walk. African American Wellness Walk. Okay, it's focused on the wellness of African American men, and this wellness is not just health. It's also it's being healthy, but it's completely healthy. It's financial health. It's mental health. It's physical health. So although the walk is not until April, we're going to have conversations every month between now and April to let you know what you can expect. Some opportunities to get involved. I'm excited to be doing some work with this walk. African American male health wellness is incredibly important to me. I'm going to talk more about that McKinsey report that highlights the disparities. And here's the number before we go into it later in the show and in the coming weeks. Here's a number. The number is 12. The disparity between African American men and white men in terms of living based on preventable diseases is 12 years. So black men live 12 years less than white men. They suffer from preventable, which is the key here, diseases. So that's why I'm super excited about being a part of this work, and we're going to talk a lot more about it. And I'm going to make sure those of you who are not the men who follow know about some opportunities along the way before the walk happens in April, some things that you can do to be involved. There's some real men, real talk conversations that are happening monthly, and there are going to be other kind of opportunities for screening. So thank you in advance for sharing this message, because we got to make sure that our brothers get the help and have the resources that they need. So with that said, I've also got to let you know one of our longtime partners has been I Love Jinka. And although on Jinka, this spot is because I'm going to update it. It talks about where you can find Jinka in HEB, but I'm also going to encourage you to go to ilovejinka.com to get your product. It is great for inflammation. It's great for overall health, for your immunization, for your immunity. And as you can hear, I've got a little allergy or something going on. I took my Jinka and my vitamin C, and it's just me getting my voice back. So you got to have the right stuff that make you healthy and well, especially during this time. And so this is where you can find Jinka if you're in the Houston area in HEB.
Here at HEB, in the Healthy Living Department of Probiotics, you can find Jinka 7 days a week.
Yeah. Look at a lot of Jinka sale. Look at that. Jinka.
So that's ilovejinka.com. You can go there and get all the information you need, and also you can read plenty of testimonials. I'm also going to post in the comments the video from the localish story that ran on ABC 13. Was it last week? Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. It was a great story, and it's now running around the country. It's running in New York, it's running in Chicago. So I want to make sure that you see it. Also, listen, what a great time to get your popcorn, right? For you to sit around the house during the holidays and have people over. Or if you want to get it for gifts for colleagues or friends or family, go to kimmytreats.com, order your popcorn today. It ships easily. We ship all over the country. It's clean, it's good popcorn, and it makes a great, great gift. Also, the organic hand with body butter is back in stock because we just obviously made a new batch and we have new packaging. So here's what you can expect when you go to kimmytreats.com. All right, so those are a few things I want you to remember as you head into the holiday season. I see our guest Coty, but I don't see his picture. I may have stepped away from the camera. Oh, there he is. There's his camera. He is back. So I want to bring in for, I can't believe it's the first time that he's been on Chalk Talk, but I'm super excited to have Coty Davis join me, a colleague and a friend, to talk a little Texans and Rockets. Welcome, my friend. Thank you for being a part of Chalk Talk today.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. I mean, you got that strong last name, right? That Davis last name. So I had a chance to really get to know Coty more this season because last year we were in COVID and most of our interactions were on Zoom. But Coty is host of a show called Locked On Texans. It's a daily podcast about the Houston Texans. But he also covers and writes writes daily or frequently about the Houston Texans. So I thought I can get two birds with one stone here by having Coty join me. Coty, first of all, your thoughts, if you will, about this Houston Texans season and where we are today. I just want to start there.
It's a big disappointment. That's the only way I can, the best way I can put it. Going back to early on in the season, Kim, as you remember, they got rid of David Culley when they hired Lovie Smith as the head coach. You elevate Pep Hamilton, regardless of what was your thoughts about Davis Mills, there was some promise that, okay, he might not be the next franchise quarterback after the departure of Deshaun Watson, but there was at least hope that he could be at least a quality starter. Some people like myself was actually hoping so much so to where you don't have to worry about the quarterback position in this upcoming draft. You could focus on other needs and, kind of really get this rebuild going in the right direction. And Kim, as you know, it seemed like the Houston Texans were on the right path to finally move forward with their rebuild. Unfortunately, here we are entering week 14 in the regular season, and the Texans have a 1-10-1 record. And Kim, I'm looking at this from a standpoint of that because of the quarterback position, because Lovie Smith, Pep Hamilton, even general manager Nick Caserio, the fact that it seems like everybody has failed in what they should have been, which was at the end of the day better than the production that they put out there on the field in 2021. It seemed like this team has taken unfortunately a step back from where the rebuild should have been when you take a look at what could have been for the 2022 campaign.
So it's interesting. I do think the season has clearly been disappointing. I'm probably one of those who didn't have a whole lot of thoughts about what Davis Mills could do. Thought this team would still need to focus on the quarterback. In fact, because the quarterback position is so important, I think this team should be getting the quarterback in every draft until they hit it, right? I think until you get your franchise quarterback, and I'm not saying you got to do it with your number one pick, But as we've seen from around the league, there are no teams that have any level of success that don't have a really good quarterback. So
Mhm.
um, I think that was a. I didn't have a lot of expectation about Davis Mills, but it does look like he's just not gotten any better. I thought at best he'd be serviceable. That's what I thought. I do think that the rebuild, I didn't necessarily think they were off and running because the personnel, I'm looking at the roster at the beginning of the season and I'm going, yeah, this is still a roster that's not very good. Um, and that's going to be a problem in a league where talent really matters. So, with that said, I'm with you. The season has been disappointing. I am probably one of the people, and I don't know if you and I've talked about this. Maybe we have. If the thought is that after this season they got a clean house, to me that starts with Nick Casario, right? It's not just Lovey and Pep. If you want to say this rebuild needs a reboot, like for real, we got a clean house. You're not cleaning house if you don't get rid of Nick Casario too. You just doing what what my dad used to call you just straightening up, right? You're not really cleaning. So if they go straighten up, they'll blame it on Lovey and Pep and keep doing this. If they gonna clean house, they go get you a general manager. I'm talking with Coty Davis, the host of Locked On Texans podcast. Cody, tell us about the podcast and how you got started with it, because you guys have been doing this for a couple years, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we actually started in the 2019 season, which was, I kind of consider that like our quote unquote preseason because me and my
Right.
co-host John Hickman, we started off, we first met each other in college, and then we started working with each other more so when we was interning at ESP in Houston. And John and myself, we had like a little small podcast called The Rundown. It used to be a weekly podcast that him and I used to do, but I saw that there was an opening that the Locked On Podcast Network wanted new hosts for the Locked On Texans podcast. So of course I reached out to David Locke, who is of course the owner of it, and he listened to what me and John had to say, and he gave us the opportunity. And like I mentioned, that first season, unfortunately, I wish I could have that season back because that was the last season that the Texans were actually good. I think that was also the
Yeah.
year that they won. I think it was 9 games in a row. That was also the playoff
Yes.
season. That was also the year where they was up 24-0 on Kansas City, and it seemed like we was gonna be covering a fun, good team for a very long time. But overall, John and myself, we finally found our footing with the podcast. I'm not gonna lock him. Hosting a daily podcast is very challenging,
Yes.
especially in the off season when you get to the point there's nothing to talk about. John and myself, we do hate the fact that the Houston Texans have fallen that bad since him and I started covering the team. However, I would say because of the shenanigans that has been taking place inside of 610 and Kirby, that has always given us something to talk about. But John and myself, man, it's really been an honor and a blessing to see where we came from day one when we started hosting this podcast to where we are now, which is one of the top rated podcasts in the city of Houston.
Well, congratulations on that. I actually got a chance to be a guest on the show last year. It was fun to hang out with you guys.
We got to get you
So you,
back.
anytime, you guys do good work, and so I know that daily grind is something. When we talk about this Houston Texans team, I'm gonna play the sound from Deshaun Watson because we all last year it was the whole what's going to happen with Deshaun, right? Is he wasn't playing here? He's going to get, when's the trade going to happen? In the offseason, they made the move. They traded him to the Cleveland Browns. He was suspended at the start of the season for 11 games. His first game back was last week against the Texans. I think those of us who, you know, cover the sport figured that he'd be rusty. It would take a minute for him to get his timing. I think the number of days they said it had been since he played in a live game was 700, not including preseason, where he had a few plays during preseason. So I don't think there were huge expectations for the Deshaun Watson that we know he can be. But it was good to actually see him back on the field. This is Deshaun Watson, who just kind of talked about his performance after the game on Sunday.
Overall, just operational. That's the biggest thing. Just getting getting in and out the huddles, calling plays. Didn't have too many miscommunications with Kevin. I heard something walking off the field, and I guess it was 700 plus days since I played. So, yeah, it's not gonna be perfect, especially playing at December football where guys are week 14, week 13, and this is week 1 for me. So. It was fun though. It was awesome to be able to get out there with my teammates. The defense played a heck of a game. Got some touchdowns for us. Special teams with DPJ. The big punt return was big for us to kind of shift the momentum, and that's what we needed at the time. And that's why it's a team sport, and we just got to keep pushing forward.
So that was Deshaun after the game on Sunday. Of course, the Browns won the game 24-17. The Browns scored no offensive touchdowns. When you think about that, the Texans outscored them offensively, but they gave up 14 points from turnovers. So no, they gave up 3 touchdowns on turnovers.
They gave
right?
up
1
3
on special
touchdowns
teams
on turnovers.
and 2 on defense. I mean, you just can't win. Like, you could bring in Vince Lombardi, and you're not going to win games like that. And it was interesting, Coty. I love your thoughts about this. There was a lot of criticism of Lovie and Pepper not being to change a quarterback, and why are you sticking with Davis Mills, and he'll awful. So then they put in Kyle Allen, who's been worse than awful. I mean, Kyle Allen has been really bad. And I listened the other day, and I have to sometimes not listen to a whole lot of local radio because it just kind of gets under my skin. And the conversation that was had yesterday was, I mean, Kyle wasn't as bad. You think Pep did something to make... So now it's Pep's fault that Kyle was coughing up the ball on the first or second play every time he gets on the field? This team is snaking. It is just not in a very good way. What are your thoughts about the quarterback situation? First of all, anybody who's saying go get Baker Mayfield, y'all just sit down and stop it. Okay? This quarterback room is what it is until the end of the season. There's really no point in trying to go and get another quarterback right now. But you should be able to be better than what they are, Coty.
Yeah, and I agree. Look, I know a lot of people, talk down on Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton. And look, some of the disappointment that we have seen out of the Houston Texans this season do fall on their shoulders. One of the things that I've been harping on Locked On Texans, and I wrote about it a lot on Texans Daily, was the fact that when you take a look at Lovie Smith's defensive system and you take a look at the skill set and the best attribute of Darius Stingley Jr., some people say they feel disappointed because they haven't got the Darius Stingley Jr. that he showcased at LSU. I understand that to a certain degree, but I do look at Lovie Smith and say, you know what, Coach? You should at least put together somewhat of a defensive scheme that is tailor-made around your quote-unquote number one corner, that is tailor-made for his best defensive attribute, which is being a one-on-one cornerback. But, I say all that just to say at the end of the day, Kim, I agree with you. You could bring in Vince Lombardi. You could bring in Bill Belichick. It doesn't matter who you bring in. At the end of the day, we're still going to see a lot of the Houston Texans struggles due to the inabilities of the talent that they have out there on the field, especially at the quarterback room. I had this running joke ever since the offseason. If it gets to the point where we see Kyle Allen at any point during the season, that means something has went hella wrong for the Houston Texans in 2022. And trust me, something has went wrong for the Houston Texans in 2022. And look, I said this over the last 2 weeks. Kyle Allen has shown us why he has been the backup quarterback for the Houston Texans for this throughout this entire season. And I take a look at his play. I take a look at his play. I take a look at Davis Mills' performance, and I think to myself, there's really not much of a difference. And look, Pep Hamilton deserves some blame. I go back to Sunday's game where the Texans were 3rd and goal, 4th and goal, and instead of them giving the ball off to Dameon Pierce, you wanted to trust Kyle Allen to throw a touchdown pass to Troy Harrison. You almost got him murdered on the play. Like, I can understand people's frustration with the play calling, but at the end of the day, I also go back to what Hamilton was able to do in Los Angeles alongside Justin Herbert. I go back to what he was able to do in Indianapolis with with Andrew Luck, and I think to
Yeah.
myself, where at the end of the day, you see that Hamilton do know the game of football, and he has a very good he has a very good attribute of developing and helping quarterbacks. And look, there's a big gap between Andrew Luck and Justin Herbert and what he's working with here in the city of Houston with Davis Mills and now Kyle Allen. And it's funny because a lot of people was calling for Kyle Allen to get into the game 2 games
Right.
into Kyle Allen's tenure as the starting quarterback of the Houston Texans. Not everybody want to see Davis Mills back in the game. And look, to be honest with you, Kim, it doesn't matter who's under center at quarterback. They could throw me under center at quarterback for the Houston Texans. You're still not going to win, especially considering that your next 2 games are against the Dallas Cowboys and the Kansas City Chiefs. So I hate when people go at Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton so much, because at the end of the day, I do believe that is 70-30 with Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton taking at least 30% of the blame, especially Pep
Yeah,
Hamilton,
absolutely.
because it doesn't matter what playbook that they call. You can see how much Pep Hamilton is handcuffed due to the inabilities of his quarterback, and not just his quarterback, even the playmakers that he have in a wide receiving core, especially considering that it looked like Brandon Cooks has given up on this team.
Yeah, yeah. I think you make some great points, Cody, and you're right. Oh, I several weeks back had Sean Jones on the show, and he said something. He says, do we really think that Pep has just forgotten everything he knew about football? He's somehow become an idiot." And so that's my challenge. Does it mean that the coaching staff deserves no criticism? It doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is I need you to first take a really good look at the roster and realize that they're not working with a lot. I did like the move though, Cody, in terms of adjustments that Lovey and the defense made by moving Jalen Petrie to from strong to free safety. And so although that wasn't the position he necessarily played in college, they felt like it was a good move. And he looked good in that position on Sunday. I mean, he's looked good throughout the season. He has had some times when he didn't look great tackling, but that was a move that looked good. And so it's going to be tough going to play Dallas. They just put 33 points in the fourth quarter on Indianapolis. I don't know what the hell they're going to do.
Oh my gosh.
I'll be watching it. I considered going to that game, but I've got some stuff to do here in Houston, and I'm going to see the Rockets play the Bucks that night. But
Yeah, me too. I'll much rather see that.
I don't really have a lot of high hopes or expectation. I'd like to see this team get some wins before the season is over, just for Lovey and for Pep. And I, for one, don't subscribe to the idea that you just tank a whole season so you can get better draft picks. Because if you don't have the people around to do something with those picks or to make the right picks, if you don't start instilling, letting these players get a feeling of what victory feels like, start getting that into the building, it's not just that easy. It's not a flip. You don't flip a switch and say, "Oh, we got the number one pick." I mean, that's not really how it works. So there's a lot left to see, I guess. It's not been exciting. While it's painful for us, I know it's got to be painful for Lovey and Pep and the entire staff. So, what I don't like, Cody, is when I hear media people, I'm not calling them all journalists, have these very personal attacks on the coaches. I think there's a line for that. I think you can criticize what they do and their work, but some of the other stuff just goes a bit too far. Do you, Cody, see any games? Let me look at the schedule. Anything can happen, right? Any given Sunday. But where do they get a win the rest of the season? So I'm pulling up the schedule. So this week they go play the Cowboys in Dallas. We don't expect that to be a win. It'd be a major upset. Then they come home, as you mentioned, they host the Chiefs the day before my birthday. Then they go to Tennessee and play the Titans. Anything could happen there, but then they play the Jaguars at home on New Year's Day, maybe there, and then they end the season against the Colts in Indianapolis. So actually their best chances for wins within the division. quite frankly. I think. I mean, the Chiefs and the Cowboys are those are teams that are fighting for a shot to get to the Super Bowl, right? But the Titans, Jaguars, and Colts, those are probably their best opportunities to get a win, and even then, not great.
The division games, I agree with you, Kim. It's their best opportunity to get a win, but I don't see them winning another game this season because now not only the coaching staff has been a problem, general manager has been a problem, the quarterback has been a problem. Kim, you could attest to this more than I can. The atmosphere around the team just isn't there no more. It's like the one thing that I would say is that when I take a look at the Texans last year and I take a look at the Texans this year, they finished the year with another 4-12 season or 4-13, whatever the case might be. And the one thing that I've always appreciated about the Texans last year that you never, or at least I never questioned their competitiveness, and I never questioned their will to go out there on the field every single Sunday and play hard. This year, it seems like ever since that loss against the Tennessee Titans, the will hasn't been there. The atmosphere around the inside the locker room, around the team, that hasn't been there. I go back and I take a look at that game on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns. I truly do believe that that was the first time that this team came out with a lot of energy, especially on defense. But I test that dude just because that was the very first game against Deshaun Watson, and you can see it, on a lot of guys' faces, especially Lovie Smith, that they actually wanted that game. They wanted that win, just for the city alone, because we know the bad divorce that Deshaun Watson had with the city. But outside of that, Kim, there's been times I'm looking at this team and I'm just thinking to myself, they're just out here collecting a paycheck at this point, and whenever it gets to that point, that's when you know that this team isn't going to win games, and one thing that I would say, talking about the disappointment of the Houston Texans in 2022, there were a stretch of games that they just finished. It was the game against the Giants, the Dolphins, the Eagles, and those were games, Washington, those were 4 games at the time, which once again, preseason projections, I didn't think neither one of these teams was going to be that good, but that was during the time when I looked at those teams in the preseason. I said, if the Texans can win more than 4 games this year, majority of those wins going to come during that stretch, because a lot of those wins, they were toss-up. A lot of them had questions around their quarterbacks and stuff. Now, the fact that they lost all 4 of those games, now you're entering the worst stretch of your season, especially going up against the Chiefs and the Cowboys. Unfortunately, that might be the Super Bowl, the 2 teams we're watching in the Super Bowl this year. Unfortunately, I'm talking about for the Cowboys side. They're going to get demolished, and by the time they go up against their counterparts in the AFC South, they're going to be even more defeated and just out there collecting a paycheck at that point.
So you know what, and I'm going to blame it on the veterans. I think the young guys are playing. I mean, I think a guy like a Damian Pierce and a Petrie and even a Single. I mean, I think there's young guys on this team that are coming to play. I would tell you I've been disappointed in a guy like a Brandon Cooks. I just have. Brandon Cooks, I'm never going to say a guy quit because I don't know if you're hurt, right? But I just know that I think it's fair to say he checked out. And now he's injured, right? He's got a calf injury, so he may or may not make it back from that. But when he checked out around the time that Jack Easterby was let go, so it seems, and then you followed it up with him not getting traded and being disappointed and these cryptic tweets. Here's what I want for some of these NFL players. If you got something to say it, right? I don't think it's right for you to be all in when you're, oh yeah, I'm all in. I'm a part of the rebuild. You get this extension and you get this check, and then you mad because you're not winning. Dude, you know who Davis Mills was. That's problematic for me. You knew who Davis Mills was. You stood up and told us how great he could be and how much he had improved. So did you mean it or you didn't? You know what I mean? I don't think you can have it both ways. And I think the players have to either be like, I'm just not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to, be negative about the team. But this whole now I'm wounded and I really wanted to win, yeah, that's a thing that makes fans really angry about players. So that's disappointing. I think Cooks is a good guy. I don't like the way that particular situation was handled because it is a job, and whether we like the way the Texans are playing, we don't get to go to the games and practices and cover it with any level of professionalism because they're not good, right? I don't get to cover the Astros one way and cover the Texans another because that's not what you sign up for. So that's just my whole overall professionalism and what you sign up for, what you get. Tony Davis Mills or Baker Mayfield, it don't really matter, but definitely not Baker Mayfield. We don't need that drama. Why? And even if it gets you a game or two, what good does it do? Absolutely Davis Mills, probably for different reasons than you think. Tony also says the Texans will beat the Colts and Jacksonville. It could happen. If they are to get wins, that's where they get them. You're right. They're not going to beat the Cowboys, and they're not going to beat the Chiefs. So that's not going to happen. Good morning, Ellen. That's my other sister. I appreciate you guys being a part of the show. And listen, I didn't hear this because I was at the game, but Tony says even Pep said on the CBS podcast that he was expecting to coach Watson when he took the job before the 2021 season. Imagine the disappointment, right? You take a job and you think it's gonna get worked out because that's probably what they were telling him, and you're gonna coach Deshaun Watson, and then you don't. You got Tyrod Taylor who can't stay healthy. And then ultimately you got Davis Mills, and then let's not forget Jeff Driscoll, right? Imagine that. It's kind of like Cody, and I'm going to make this pivot for a minute. Steven Silas, when he took the jump to Rockets, you think you're going to coach Westbury and James Harden, and then you're not.
I was thinking that same thing,
right? And then you're not. But you just got to pivot and you got to do what you do. Good morning, Charles Lamar Drayton. That's our legal consultant for Chalk Talk. So it's great to have him on, who says, I'm not available to quarterback the Texans. He just want them calling. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Houston Rockets because I think that team is young and exciting. That is legitimately a rebuild. Right, because they've gone out and gotten some talent. You and I have had this conversation. I just really hope that Steven Silas gets to continue through this rebuild. I hope he gets the time. The players really do respond to him. He has been what this young team has needed as they've ramped up. We see they have talent. We see them performing. Now that's a team that I think is fair to say competes all the time. And when we saw them last season, the last game of the season, when they had no shot, right, getting to postseason, they had no shot at being anything other than one of the worst two teams in the league. And they played to the last moment until the bell rung. And so I think that says something about one of the players that you have, but I think it says something too about the coach, that he gets them to play even when like we're growing, but we're not just sitting back on that and saying, oh yeah, we're growing, we're young, we're building. Prime example last night, the double overtime win at home against the 76ers, the win on the road last Friday against the Phoenix Sun. This team is exciting, and it was good to see them get that win last night.
Yeah, I say it all the time. It's the complete 180 from the rebuild that we've seen from the Houston Texans. And the one thing that I've said about the Rockets ever since they started their rebuild, more so last year when you started bringing in Jalen Green, you started bringing in LP, you started seeing the progression of Kevin Porter Jr. With them, it was more so time, patience, and just getting the experience. And Kim, the first half of last season was terrible. I believe they started like 1-15. Then once again,
yes.
Then once again, for some reason in Steven Silas's, first 3 years, he have like this random 5 to 7 game win streak, and then they start losing again. But when I go back to last season, prior to All-Star break, you just saw a team that was young, and there was some odd fits like Daniel Tice, Christian Wood, and after the All-Star break, once Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green really started elevating their game, that's when you saw the Houston Rockets, turn the corner. And this year, it was more so of the same thing. When you take a look at those first 9 to 10 games, they were not getting blown out, but they were losing. Now you take a look at their last 7 games; they're 4-3, and you are just seeing a team that is really starting to learn and apply. And one of the reasons why I would love to see Steven Silas, actually build and grow with this team. Him just like Pep Hamilton, you thought you was getting this future Hall of Fame, all-star Pro Bowl type talent in James Harden and Russell Westbrook, but all of a sudden, as we know the story, both of those guys leave and you get left with a young team. The one thing that made me, at least, I don't want to use this word, but I guess happy that Steven Silas was the guy in charge of this rebuild, was the fact that he'd been down this road before. Kim, I don't know if you ever noticed, but ever since he has taken over, and maybe more so since they had, Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr., I always ask Steven Silas a lot about how are you leaning on the fact that you helped develop the likes of LeBron James, Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, and even Kemba Walker to a certain extent, Baron Davis. I mean, with the exception of LeBron, because I know that's a different talent at the end of the day. Right. But every single one of those guys, top 2, no lower than the top 3 greatest player of all time. But every single one of those players always talked about how when they was young, they leaned on the likes of Coach Steven Silas. And Silas actually talked about how he kept notes on every single one of those players, and he's leaning on those notes to help guys like a Jalen Green. And I think that is why we were seeing Green and Kevin Porter Jr., even now guys like Tari and Jabari, especially after the way they played in last night's win over the 76ers. Right. I believe that's why we are seeing them get on a progression quicker. And I really do believe that is Steven Silas's best attribute. And, as of right now, I don't really have like an opinion on Raphael Stone, but what I would say is I believe that he has done a solid job, because just like him, he took over a team thinking that, okay, I just need to retool a championship contending team. And then, he ended up trading 2 future Hall of Famers. Say what you want about the guy, but at the end of the day, I think he has done a solid job being dealt a hand, kind of similar to Nick Caserio, but you can see both of these guys basically take a different approach, to where the Rockets were able to say, you know what, we're young, we're going to continue building, we're fighting, and we're going to make sure we're not going to lose the will to win, despite what our record might show.
You make a great point. I think the jury's probably still out on Raphael Stone. What we know is he's gotten great capital back in those deals. And we'll see this off season, right? What he's able to do, if he's able to go out and get maybe a mid-level exception type veteran, or brings in a big free agent and says we're going to really start turning the corner in terms of some veteran leadership, because this team is still very, very young. Last night after the game, I know that you asked Coach Silas something about what it means to finally get a win like this. This is Coach Silas answering that after last night's double overtime win.
I want what's best for them, right? So for them to continue to fight and lose games, that's not great. that doesn't feel good when they go home, and it doesn't feel good when we're at practice. So we definitely don't take, I guess, because of what we went through the first 10 games of the season, we definitely don't take stuff like this for granted. We feel good about it, but it does kind of set a foundation for us moving forward.
That was Coach Silas after last night's win, and that was a great question, because there are these people who feel like, oh, don't win too much. I had to leave and listen to the end of the game on the radio, because I was doing TV last night, and when I got to the station, one of the guys on the segment was like, don't win too much. I said, listen, they've got plenty of capital, right?
Much.
They've got plenty of draft capital. What they've got to do is start learning how to win, because like I said, there's not a switch that you just flip on and say, okay, we got the number 1 pick. And especially in the NBA, even if you have the worst record in the league, you're not guaranteed to get the top pick, right? Mm-hmm. Because they've been that team and they haven't gotten it. But they've got to start doing is learning how to play play at this level, play with speed, and to be competitive. I think that's what really matters. That was exciting to see. You know, Cody, I was doing a show before the start of the season, and we were talking about the Rockets and what's a player that's going to be a really big factor. Obviously, Jabari Smith, right? New, their top pick in the draft. He's long. He's a great defensive player, and we've seen that he can also shoot it as well. But the player that I said, because to me that's an obvious with Jabari, but it was Tyree Eason because of the kind of player that Tyree Eason is. He's always around the ball. He's just doing what you need him to do, whether it's defensively, he likes to play defense, whether it's making a shot when you need it, it's around the rim, he's gotten better there. What are your thoughts about the rookies? We haven't seen a lot of Ty yet, but Jabari and Tari so far, I'm pleased.
Both of those guys are doing what I expected of them. You know, going into the draft, I know that a lot of people wanted Paolo Banchero, which, I mean, I don't disagree to a certain extent because, I mean, the guy's phenomenal. But the one thing that when I looked at the Rockets last year and how last year ended, I started to see the pieces of the puzzle being put together. You know, I started seeing, okay, Kevin Porter Jr. could be your facilitator / when you need him to go get the bucket, he could go do it. Jalen Green, from the very first moment he walked inside of Toyota Center, he was your number one scoring option. But the one thing that I wanted to see, and I always went back to what Stephen Silas said at the end of last season. He said one thing that he wanted the Rockets to be is more so of a defensive-minded team. And when I took a look at the prospects that was coming out of last year's draft, the two guys that caught my attention was Tari Eason and Jabari Smith Jr. You know, I don't have no sources yet, but I kind of figured that Tari Eason was going to be a realistic possibility. But I did mention on my podcast stuff that I wrote about, I did mention that Jabari Smith Jr. would have been a better fit for the Rockets to speed up this rebuilding process more so than Apollo Banchero, because I felt if you brought Apollo in, you was going to just add another high volume scorer, somebody who also needs the ball in his hand, who's not going to give you much on the defensive side of the court. As for if you got Jabari Smith Jr., that was going to be a guy who can basically take the role as your defensive anchor. And not only that, he can also be a primary factor on the offensive side of the ball, but he doesn't need the ball to be effective. He can go out there and get the offensive rebound. He could be what Coach Stephen Silas wants to run on the offensive side of the ball, that 4 out 1 in type of offense. And that is what we are seeing. And I believe that both of those guys have brought more balance and stability to the Rockets lineup, to what we are seeing with the product that they are putting out there on the floor. And that is the reason why we are finally seeing the Rockets turn the corner. As I just mentioned, over the last 7 games, they're 4-3.
And I think that's important. And the teams that they've played, and Jabari addressed this last night, they've played teams who are in the conversation about whether those teams would be added to the championship. Here's first I'm going to let you hear from KPJ last night. It's about the emotions of getting a win like last night.
It was highs and lows. We had the bench going up and down. The crowd was going up and down. So that was probably the most exciting game that we've been in. Factor in it was our first double OT game and our first OT game. So definitely a lot of emotion going on, but we stayed poised and got the win.
Any extra incentive going against James?
Say it again?
Any extra incentive going against James tonight?
Yeah, I mean, that was my idol. That's someone that I put a lot of work in when it comes to film and study before I even got to the NBA. So when I got to the NBA, I definitely want to challenge him and continue for him to follow his greatness versus me, because, like I said, that was my idol, but I'm definitely going after him.
What was your mentality locking in late defensively?
So that was KPJ. And of course, out of fairness, James Harden's first game back after being banged up and being injured. And so, but still, you know, he was on the floor. We saw some flashes of James Harden. And here is, before you go, Cody, I'm going to let the audience hear from James Harden.
Things necessary to translate to the game. It's difficult. So, like I said, the results wasn't optimal as a team. We wanted, but
does it mean? What does it mean when a player like Kevin Porter Jr. says that you're his idol? He emulates his game after you.
I mean, individuals who are working for us by going forward is to pave the way and give guys like KP, and so many other guys, the ability and hope to go out there and make their families proud and make a lot of people proud. So, I'm appreciative of that.
That was James Harden after last night's game. You're right. I've been excited about Jabari and Tari Eason, and I really like Tari. I like what I see from Jabari. I think this team has a lot of upside. Listen, their first games, they had like 8 games on the road or something. They got out to a really hectic start. It was like, come on, NBA, is this what you're doing to this really young team? But now they're home, and they're in a good stretch. They opened this home streak last night with the win in Philadelphia, and then they have 7 of their next 8 at home. They go a little quick trip up to San Antonio, and then they're home for most of the month. So this will be a time. Hopefully, they can get some more wins and kind of propel themselves for a much more competitive second half of the season. I mean, it's still early. We're not at the second half yet. But, wind down this year and start 2023 on a much better foot.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And like I mentioned, Kim, I truly believe that this team is just going to continue trending upward because, they have the right people in place. And, and if I could just say this really quick, I hate the theory of tanking. It's never good because at the end of the day, the only thing you're doing is creating a losing culture. For the people that's out there that's rooting for tanking, that want to see the Rockets lose, want to see the Texans lose, there's a team in the NFL seems like they've been tanking for 3 decades, and that's the Detroit Lions. The Cleveland Browns seem like they've been tanking for 2 decades, with the exception of a winning season here and a winning season there. In the NBA, the Sacramento Kings been tanking since 2007, I think was their last playoff appearance. So, you don't want to establish that losing culture. And I like that the Rockets rebuild, they're out there fighting every single game. And I truly do believe that they are going to be a dangerous team, not more so to say they're about to, be a playoff caliber team or anything like that. But as we saw over these last couple of games, especially, teams that's are championship contenders like the Phoenix Suns, like the Philadelphia 76ers, if they take these young guys for granted, they will go out there and end up with a loss.
With that note, Coty Davis, I appreciate it. I promised you 20 or 30 minutes, and it's been much longer. So I don't overstay my welcome. So when I ask you to come back, you will. Thank you for being on Chalk Talk. You will have to come back. I will probably see you tomorrow at the Texans. And tell people where they can follow you. I'll also put a link to Locked On Texans in the comments.
Thank you. And you can follow me on Twitter at Coty Davis _24. Once again, that's Coty COTY DAVIS _24.
All right. Thank you, Coty. I will see you soon, and keep up the great work.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
All right. That's Coty Davis. I say colleague and a friend, and I'm glad that he was able to join us today. I'm going to let you hear before we get out of here from Jabari Smith Jr. after last night's win, and also Tari Eason. Here's Jabari talking about just kind of where this team is and playing in a game like last night.
Just winning big games against playoff teams, these teams competing for championships. They compete for. So just knowing that we can go out there and compete with them, let alone beat them. So it's just feel good.
For the future, learning from the experience?
Yeah, definitely. Just how mental the game is, how important every possession is late in the game, and just how important it is to trust your teammates.
This was a really well-rounded team win. You had guys from the bench like Tari and KJ that were bringing hustle, and then you had you have Eric Gordon, and then of course KPJ. What does it mean to get that complete team win?
It feels great, against a great team with veterans, a veteran coach who's been doing it for a long time. It's it just feel good. You got guys like Bruno, encouraging everybody and just keeping us a unit. So it was fun to get this win.
When you're out there on the court and, we know that you're a rookie, but you're going up against veterans, you don't even think that that's not even in your mind. It's just playing basketball.
We're all in the same court. We're all in the same game. You know what I'm saying? All of the other years and all of that's out the window. We're on the same court, so,
I love that. And it's not about being cocky, it's about being confident and saying, you know what, we go out on the court, we all got to play. And they did. It was energy in the Toyota Center that you don't often get to experience. You haven't a lot in recent years. The fans were into it. There was excitement. They were clearly cheering for the Rock. It was a Rockets crowd. That was exciting. And one more player, rookie Tyree Eason, who, if you follow me, you know I am. I like them both, but Tyree Eason, I just feel like is that guy that really makes a difference and gets stuff done beyond what you really expect from a Jabari Smith Jr. Here's Tyree Eason.
You just got to use the NBA defenders, and you got to stay consistent among all things. I know in times like that, or times that I've had where I was inconsistent around the rim. You can overthink things and things like that. But I know that I'm here for a reason, and I just got to stay true to myself and true to what got me here, which is work, and that's all I continue to do.
How do you think you guys handled the physicality of Joel Embiid in this game?
I think we handled it, as well as we could have. He's a big dude, but he's someone that I think you just got to lock in defensively on. You got to send two guys at him just to kind of contain him. So I think we did.
So that was Tyree Eason, and he was talking about what they did, how they handled Joel Embiid, who had a monster game. I think he finished with 39 points before he fouled out. He's a beast, but they were able to get it done. So it was a great win for them. Let's see here. Tony says Titans fired GM John Robinson, and they are in first place. So, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. Well, that is interesting. I just don't really know what to expect from Cal McNair in terms of what he's going to do moving forward. He had leaned on Bill O'Brien. That was a mistake. He put all this trust into Jack Easterby. That was a mistake. Which is how we got in Nick Caserio, because he was not on the list of GMs that the Texans were going to be looking at, that the search firm had put together. And so, it's going to be interesting to see which way the McNairs go at the end of this season. And Tony talks about Amy Adams Strunk, that of course was Bud Adams' daughter. His Bud Adams' daughter is a better owner than Cal and Janice. Miss Janice, in her defense, is older and her health hasn't been great. I think it's really more Cal, but I think that's definitely fair. Morocco just sprung a big upset. Thing is done. I appreciate you, Tony, for the live updates during Chalk Talk. Our Chalk Talk fan correspondent, he's talking about the World Cup. Morocco defeats Spain. Thank you for that, sir. What was the score? Drop that in the chat for me. And before I go today, I want to just spend a couple minutes talking about Deion Sanders going to be the new head coach of Colorado. And so I did a segment last night for those of you in the Houston area on Isaiah Carey's show on Fox. We were talking about it. I quite frankly was surprised at all of the vitriol that had been spewed online and how angry people were about how angry people were about Deion taking the job. I think Deion did a lot for SWAC. I think he did a lot for Jackson State. And, he had a decent relationship, it seems, with the mayor of in Jackson State in the area, but not so much the governor in terms of being able to maybe get some other things done. And just the shine that he brought to HBCUs. What needs to happen is HBCUs needs to pick up the mantle and continue. Now, granted, you can say, well, listen, you could have Bubba McDowell at PV call up some of his friends, and you could have coaches at different schools at HBCUs or in the SWAC to try to do some of that, and they can. They're not Deion. right? There's something about Deion and his personality. I get that. But just like Deion was able to get Michael Strahan to come to the sideline, give Michael Strahan, Texas Southern University, a reason to come and be on your sideline, right? I can't be. Listen, he also wanted an opportunity for his coaches to have to better opportunities to get paid. And so I hear you. I hear those. I mean, Tony says it's how Deion sold it when he came in kind of as a savior and he left in 3 years. Listen, don't all the coaches that go in act when they come in, they're always the ones, right? They are always the one. So I just don't think the rules should be different for Deion than they are for other coaches. That's all I'm saying. I hope that some of the things that he did, because he did make a difference, that those things are that the schools say, you know what, how can we do some of that? How can we build on some of this? And to take some of the onus on, we've got to build our institutions, because who else is going to do it? The state is not, clearly, as in Jackson State, as in Mississippi. So I just think it should be, I think you could celebrate what he did and then the opportunities he has ahead and what he's, what he's going to do at his next stop. I think that he will be able to recruit anywhere in the country. There was a time when Colorado recruited really heavily here in the Houston area. And I've heard this argument before too, Tony, but to leave for the worst Power 5 job. I mean, they got great facilities, they got some money, they willing to let you come and do your thing. I don't think it's going to be the worst Power 5 school for long. I just don't. And, where was he going to go? I don't think Florida State was going to come open anytime soon. I think that's the position that people would have said, oh, yeah. And remember, he still is a black head coach at a Power 5 school. There are not a whole lot of those. So I'm gonna let Deion make it and be glad that he spent time at SWAC and the SWAC got some shine and people started talking about HBCUs and hope that the HBCUs pick up the mantle and build on some of what Deion started at the various institutions. I want to hop back over and talk about the Texans because Mark Solomon, my dear friend Mark Solomon said, is Rick Smith available? It's funny you say that because I was having a conversation on, maybe it was Sunday after the game, with a colleague, and we said, you know what, Cal McNair should pick up the phone, call Rick Smith and say, you know what, we were wrong. We were wrong. That's it. We were wrong about it, everything. And because Rick Smith has been the most successful and most effective general manager this team has had. Now, you may say the bar is low, but it's the truth. I don't know if people's egos will allow them to do that. To answer your question, as far as I know, Rick Smith is available. If I'm Cal, listen, I go get Rick. You know Rick. You know what I mean? I just think this whole Patriots way debacle, it's a mess. It is a mess. That's just what I think. We'll see what happens. But to answer your question, I believe that Rick Smith might be available. And I also believe that Cal McNair should pick up the phone and call him. Yes, he was good at filling roster spots with undrafted free agents. He also did a good job in the draft. I mean, there was some criticism of Rick, but the little criticism that people had of Rick is nothing compared to the colossal failures that we've seen at that GM spot in the last few years. I'm just saying, Bill O'Brien was the absolute worst, and I'm not convinced that Caserio is the person to right the ship. That's just me, one woman's thought and opinion. But if you say that you need to clean house with the Houston Texans, then you got to clean the whole house. It means you got to get a new general manager, right? Otherwise, like my name would say, you just straightening up. Mark said, anybody seen Nick? Yeah, I'm sure. He did I see him Sunday? Sometimes I see him heading into the coach's booth. And his friends over at 610, they get to see him, periodically, but no, I haven't seen him a whole lot. Nope, I haven't seen him a whole lot, and I'm okay with that. Wish him well, but if they clean house, they need to clean the whole house. Otherwise, you just straighten it up. All right, everybody. Thank you as always for being a part of Chalk Talk. I appreciate your engagement and I appreciate you showing up. Make sure that you share this video with your audience, whichever platform you happen to be watching today's show on. It will also become a podcast. It's on the Spotify network. So you can also listen to the show later if you are not able to see the replay. And make sure that you follow Coty Davis. Thank you, Coty, for being a part of Chalk Talk today. I always appreciate it. If you missed last week's show, go back and check out the replay. It was a really good guest, David Steele, who hasn't been with us for a while, but he wrote the book called It Was Always a Choice, and it's about activism with athletes, and there's a picture of Colin Kaepernick on the cover, but it's a really interesting book that kind of takes us through the history of activism among athletes, and he's just a great writer and a great storyteller. So I encourage you to go back and check that show out and check the book out. All right, before we get out of here today, let me remind you again, today's show is brought to you by the World Youth Foundation and the upcoming African American Male Wellness Agency's walk. That walk is April the 15th, but it's all the things happening between now and April 15th. On next week's show, I hope to have Pastor Jamal Johnson join me to talk a little bit about the work. He is the person responsible for bringing the walk to Houston. This walk has been going on in Columbus, Ohio for about 15 years. And Pastor Jay said after he read that McKinsey report and saw those numbers, he thought we have got to do something in our city. So hopefully I can have him on next week if his schedule allows it. If not, he will be joining us soon, because I really want you to know more about that work and the space where you can get involved and be supportive. But in the meantime, remember, if you have not taken your vaccines, do so. Get your flu shot, get your COVID vaccine. They're talking about how rough this winter is going to be with these respiratory illnesses. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Go to ilovejinka.com to order Jinka. Go to kimmytreats.com to get your popcorn and your body butter. And remember, do something kind for yourself and something kind for somebody else. I'll see you next Tuesday right here on, I was about to say Beyond the Headline. I don't know, that keeps coming up on Chalk Talk and on all my platforms between now and then. Make it a great week, everybody.